In the shadowed corridors of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets whisper through ancient stones, a conversation was about to unfold that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. It was a cold February morning in 2026 when Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, made a decision that would force her nephew Prince Harry to choose between the life he had built and the legacy he was born to inherit. What started as a routine security briefing would become the most pivotal moment in modern royal history. A single overheard conversation, a guard's moment of weakness, and a family duty that could no longer be ignored were about to collide in ways that no one could have predicted. The ultimatum that Princess Anne was preparing to deliver wasn't just about family obligations or public appearances. It was about survival. The survival of an institution that had weathered world wars, scandals, and social revolutions, but now faced its greatest challenge yet. And at the center of it all was Harry, the spare who had chosen love over duty, freedom over tradition, only to discover that some choices can never truly be unmade. This is the story of what happened when the most private member of the royal family decided that enough was enough, when duty demanded the unthinkable, and when a family's most closely guarded secrets were about to be exposed by the very people sworn to protect them. It's a tale of loyalty tested, bridges burned, and rebuilt, and the price of being born into a legacy that spans 1,000 years. In the next few hours, everything would change. The question wasn't whether Harry would accept his aunt's ultimatum, it was whether the royal family could survive what was about to unfold. The early morning mist clung to the grounds of Windsor Castle like a shroud, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that seemed to hold secrets within its grey embrace. Sergeant James Mitchell had been walking these grounds for nearly 15 years, his footsteps as familiar with the ancient pathways as his own heartbeat. At 42, he had served the royal family with unwavering dedication, his loyalty as solid as the castle walls themselves. But on this particular February morning, his world was about to be turned completely upside down. Mitchell had arrived early for his shift, as was his custom. The 5:30 a.m. security briefing was still an hour away, but he preferred the quiet moments before the castle awakened to its daily routines. These were the times when he could walk the perimeter in peace, checking the security systems and ensuring that everything was in perfect order for another day of royal duties and obligations. As he rounded the corner near the private chapel of St. George, he noticed a light glowing from the small conference room that Princess Anne often used for her private meetings. This was unusual. The Princess Royal was known for her punctuality, but even she rarely conducted business before dawn. Curiosity mixed with professional concern as Mitchell approached the window, intending to ensure that everything was secure. What he heard through the slightly open window would haunt him for days to come. The situation with Harry has gone too far. Princess Anne's voice cut through the morning air with its characteristic directness. We cannot continue to pretend that his choices haven't affected the entire institution.
Mitchell froze, his training warring with his natural instinct to step away.
Protocol dictated that he should leave immediately. Royal conversations were sacrosanct, and overhearing them was grounds for immediate dismissal. But something in the Princess Royal's tone held him captive, a gravity that spoke of momentous decisions being made. Your Majesty, with respect, Harry is building a new life in America, came another voice that Mitchell recognized as Sir Edward Thornbury, Princess Anne's private secretary. Perhaps it would be best to let sleeping dogs lie. Sleeping dogs? Anne's laugh was sharp, lacking any warmth. Edward, you're being naive. The Crown cannot afford to have loose ends, especially not when those loose ends involve intimate knowledge of family matters that could destabilize everything we've worked to preserve. Mitchell's heart began to race. He knew he should leave, knew that what he was hearing was never meant for his ears, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. The implications of what the Princess Royal was discussing sent chills down his spine. The American media circus surrounding Harry and Meghan shows no signs of diminishing, Anne continued, her voice growing harder with each word. If anything, it's intensifying. Every interview, every appearance, every book deal chips away at the monarchy's foundation. And now, with the recent developments, Sir Edward's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You mean the documents? Precisely. If those documents ever surface, if Harry ever decides to use what he knows about the events of 2019, about the real reason behind certain decisions that were made, it won't just be embarrassing, it could be catastrophic. Mitchell felt his breath catch in his throat. Documents? What documents? His mind raced through the various security protocols he was familiar with, trying to understand what could be so damaging that it would require this level of concern from Princess Anne. So what are you proposing? Sir Edward asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. An ultimatum, Anne replied without hesitation. Harry needs to understand that his current path is unsustainable, not just for him, but for everyone. He has a choice to make, and he needs to make it now. And if he refuses, the silence that followed was more ominous than any words could have been. Mitchell found himself holding his breath, waiting for an answer that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. Then we implement Protocol 7, Anne finally said, her voice as cold as the morning air. Protocol 7. Mitchell had heard whispers of various contingency plans throughout his years of service, but this was something entirely new to him. The way Princess Anne spoke of it, with such finality and gravity, suggested it was something far more serious than typical royal damage control. Are you certain this is the right course of action? Sir Edward pressed. Once we set this in motion, there may be no going back. There's already no going back, Anne replied firmly. Harry made his choice when he left. He made his choice when he began speaking publicly about private family matters. And he'll make his choice when he decides how to respond to what I'm about to offer him. Mitchell heard the sound of papers shuffling, followed by footsteps moving across the room. His pulse quickened as he realized the meeting might be coming to an end. If he was discovered now, lurking outside the window, the consequences would be severe beyond imagination. I want you to arrange a private meeting, Anne instructed. Not here, not at any official residence. Somewhere neutral, somewhere secure. I'll give Harry one final opportunity to rejoin the fold, to accept his responsibilities and obligations. But this time, it comes with conditions that are non-negotiable. What sort of conditions? Complete cessation of all media activities related to the royal family. An end to the book deals, the interviews, the tell-all documentaries. A return to England for a minimum of 6 months each year. And most importantly, his absolute assurance that certain sensitive information will never be disclosed, regardless of future circumstances.
Sir Edward's sharp intake of breath was audible even from Mitchell's position by the window.
And if he refuses? Then Harry will learn that leaving the royal family doesn't mean leaving behind royal consequences, Anne said with a finality that sent ice through Mitchell's veins. There are aspects of his past, of his actions during his time as a working royal, that could be problematic if they were to become public knowledge. Mitchell's mind reeled. Was Princess Anne suggesting some form of blackmail? The implications were staggering, contradicting everything he thought he knew about the royal family's approach to handling internal conflicts. When do you want to schedule this meeting? Sir Edward asked, his voice betraying his own discomfort with the direction the conversation had taken. Within the week. I want this resolved before the Easter celebrations. The family needs to present a united front, and that means Harry needs to make his decision quickly. And Meghan? She's part of the equation, obviously. Harry's choices affect her, just as her influence affects his decisions. But ultimately, this is about Harry's blood, his birthright, and his duty. Some things transcend marriage, even royal marriages. The sound of chairs being pushed back indicated that the meeting was concluding. Mitchell's training finally overcame his shock, and he quickly but quietly moved away from the window, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just heard. As he walked briskly toward the security office, Mitchell struggled to process the magnitude of what had just transpired. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach and unwavering dedication to duty, was preparing to deliver an ultimatum to her nephew that could fundamentally alter the course of the royal family's future. The documents she had mentioned, what could they contain that would be so damaging? And Protocol 7? What exactly did that entail? Mitchell's 15 years of service had exposed him to many royal secrets, but nothing had ever felt as momentous as this. More troubling still was the implication that Harry possessed information that could be catastrophic if revealed. What had happened in 2019 that was so sensitive? Mitchell remembered that year as being particularly turbulent for the royal family, with Harry and Meghan's relationship with the media reaching new levels of tension, but he couldn't pinpoint any specific event that would warrant this level of concern. As he reached the security office, Mitchell faced a dilemma that went to the core of his professional identity. His oath of service demanded absolute discretion, but what he had overheard suggested actions that troubled his moral compass. Was he obligated to report what he had heard? To whom would he report it? And what would be the consequences for everyone involved, including himself? The early morning mist was beginning to lift, revealing the familiar contours of the castle grounds that had been his second home for so many years, but everything felt different now, charged with an undercurrent of tension and uncertainty that he had never experienced before. In just a few hours, the normal routine of castle life would begin. Staff arriving for their duties, security briefings, the careful choreography of royal obligations. But beneath that familiar surface, Mitchell now knew, forces were moving that could reshape everything. Princess Anne's ultimatum to Harry was about to set in motion a chain of events that would test the very foundations of the modern monarchy. And somehow, through his moment of accidental eavesdropping, Sergeant James Mitchell had become an unwilling witness to history in the making. The question that haunted him as he prepared for his morning briefing was simple yet profound. What was his responsibility now that he possessed knowledge that could change everything? In the hours to come, that question would become increasingly urgent as the implications of Princess Anne's plan began to unfold in ways that no one could have anticipated. 3 days had passed since Sergeant Mitchell's fateful discovery, and the weight of the secret he carried seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Sleep had become elusive, his appetite had disappeared, and his wife Sarah had begun to notice the change in his demeanor. How could he explain that he had accidentally stumbled upon what might be the most significant royal family crisis in decades? Mitchell found himself obsessing over every detail of that morning conversation, replaying Princess Anne's words in his mind like a broken record. The more he thought about it, the more questions arose. What documents could be so damaging that they would prompt such drastic action? What had Harry done or witnessed in 2019 that made him such a perceived threat? And most disturbing of all, what exactly was Protocol 7? His professional instincts warred with his growing unease about the ethical implications of what he had overheard. Princess Anne had always been his favorite member of the royal family. Straightforward, hard-working, and seemingly free of the drama that occasionally surrounded other royals. But the conversation he had witnessed revealed a side of her that was calculating and potentially ruthless, willing to use whatever leverage necessary to protect the institution she served. On Thursday morning, as Mitchell conducted his routine patrol, he noticed increased activity around Princess Anne's private office. Sir Edward Thornbury had arrived earlier than usual, accompanied by 2 individuals Mitchell didn't recognize. A woman in an expensive-looking coat and a man carrying what appeared to be a leather document case. The sight sent a chill down his spine as he wondered if these visitors were connected to the ultimatum Princess Anne was preparing. By mid-afternoon, Mitchell's anxiety had reached a breaking point. He found himself standing outside the door of Chief Security Officer David Whitman's office, his hand raised to knock, before thinking better of it and walking away. What would he say? That he had accidentally overheard a private royal conversation that suggested potential blackmail? The very thought of making such an accusation seemed preposterous. As the day wore on, Mitchell became increasingly aware that his behavior was attracting attention. His colleague, Sergeant Thompson, had asked him twice if everything was all right, noting that he seemed distracted. Even worse, during the evening briefing, Chief Whitman had given him a sharp look when Mitchell failed to respond to a direct question about perimeter security protocols. That evening, as Mitchell walked to his car in the staff parking area, he was surprised to see Sir Edward Thornbury approaching him. The Princess Royal's private secretary rarely interacted directly with security personnel, making this encounter both unusual and ominous. "Sergeant Mitchell," Sir Edward said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "might I have a word?" Mitchell's heart rate immediately spiked, but he maintained his professional composure. "Of course, sir. How can I help you?" "I understand you've been conducting some early morning patrols this week," Sir Edward continued, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. "Admirable dedication to duty. I trust everything has been quiet?" The question seemed loaded with meaning that went far beyond simple security concerns. Mitchell felt as though he was walking through a minefield, where one wrong step could destroy his career and potentially much more. "Yes, sir," Mitchell replied carefully. "All quiet on the morning rounds. Just routine checks of the perimeter and building security." Sir Edward nodded slowly, studying Mitchell's face with uncomfortable intensity. "Good, good. It's so important that our security personnel maintain the highest standards of discretion. Sometimes, in the course of their duties, they might inadvertently witness or overhear things that are sensitive in nature." Mitchell felt sweat forming on his palms despite the cool evening air. Was Sir Edward testing him? Did he know about the overheard conversation? "I understand the importance of discretion, sir," Mitchell replied, choosing his words with extreme care. "It's fundamental to everything we do here."
Indeed it is, Sir Edward agreed.
"And I am sure you understand that any breach of that discretion, however accidental, could have far-reaching consequences. Not just for the individual involved, but for their family, their career, their entire future." The implied threat was unmistakable, though delivered with the kind of polite menace that only someone schooled in diplomatic language could achieve. Mitchell felt a cold knot forming in his stomach as he realized that his suspicions were correct. Sir Edward knew exactly what Mitchell had overheard. "I've always taken my oath of service very seriously," Mitchell managed to say. his mouth feeling suddenly dry. Of course you have. 15 years of exemplary service speaks for itself, Sir Edward replied. I'm simply ensuring that you're aware of how much we value loyalty and how seriously we take any potential threats to the confidential nature of royal business. With that, Sir Edward gave a nod that somehow managed to be both friendly and menacing, then walked away toward his own vehicle, leaving Mitchell standing alone in the parking lot with his heart pounding. The drive home was a blur of anxiety and racing thoughts. Sir Edward's conversation had confirmed Mitchell's worst fears. Not only did they know he had overheard the conversation about Harry, but they were actively monitoring his behavior and prepared to take action if they perceived him as a threat. When he arrived home, Sarah immediately noticed his agitated state. After 15 years of marriage to a royal protection officer, she had learned to read the signs of when her husband was carrying the weight of something he couldn't discuss. "James, you've been different all week," she said as they sat down for dinner. "Is everything all right at work?" Mitchell looked at his wife's concerned face and felt the full weight of his isolation. He couldn't tell her what he had learned, not just because of his oath of service, but because doing so might put her at risk as well. If Sir Edward's veiled threats were any indication, the royal family was prepared to protect their secrets by any means necessary. "Just some routine security concerns," he replied, hating himself for the lie. "Nothing to worry about." But Sarah wasn't easily fooled. "James, in all our years together, I've never seen you this rattled by routine security concerns. Are you sure there's nothing you can tell me?" The temptation to unburden himself was overwhelming. To share the incredible story of Princess Anne's ultimatum, the mysterious documents, and Protocol 7, but even as the words formed in his mind, he knew he couldn't speak them. The stakes were simply too high. That night, as Sarah slept beside him, Mitchell lay awake staring at the ceiling, his mind churning through his limited options. He could remain silent and hope that whatever Princess Anne was planning would unfold without his involvement. He could attempt to warn Harry somehow, though he had no idea how to contact the Duke of Sussex, or whether Harry would even believe such an incredible story. Or he could try to find someone in authority who might be able to intervene, though he couldn't think of anyone with both the power and the willingness to challenge the Princess Royal. As dawn approached, Mitchell made a decision that surprised even himself. He would attempt to learn more about Protocol 7 and the mysterious documents Princess Anne had mentioned. If he was going to be carrying this burden, he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with. His opportunity came sooner than expected. The next morning, as he conducted his early patrol, Mitchell noticed that Sir Edward's office was unoccupied, but the door was slightly ajar. His 15 years of security training had taught him that such oversights were extremely rare in the royal household, where attention to detail was paramount. After a quick check to ensure he was unobserved, Mitchell slipped into the office. His heart pounded as he quickly scanned the desk, looking for any documents that might shed light on the situation. Most of the papers appeared to be routine correspondence, but in a locked drawer that hadn't been properly closed, he spotted a file marked with a classification level he had never seen before. Inside the file, Mitchell found documents that made his blood run cold. Protocol 7, it turned out, was a comprehensive contingency plan for what the file termed the neutralization of threats to the Crown's stability from within the royal family itself. The procedures outlined were chillingly thorough, involving everything from financial pressure to legal action to what was euphemistically referred to as reputation management through strategic information disclosure. But it was the second set of documents that truly shocked him. Detailed surveillance reports on Harry and Meghan's activities in America, including transcripts of private conversations, financial records, and what appeared to be compromising information about various aspects of their new life. The scope of the monitoring was staggering, suggesting a level of royal family resources and reach that Mitchell had never imagined. Most disturbing of all was a document dated just 2 days ago, outlining the specific terms of the ultimatum Princess Anne intended to deliver. The conditions were even more severe than Mitchell had originally understood. Harry would be required to return to England permanently. With Meghan and their children, all their American business ventures would be terminated. And most shocking of all, they would be required to submit to ongoing monitoring and control over their public statements for the rest of their lives. The alternative outlined in the document was stark: complete financial cutoff, legal action to reclaim various assets and titles, and the systematic destruction of their reputations through the strategic release of carefully compiled, damaging information. Mitchell photographed the key documents with trembling hands, knowing that he was crossing a line from which there would be no return. As he carefully returned everything to its original position and slipped out of the office, he realized that he now possessed information that could potentially save Harry and Meghan from what amounted to a sophisticated form of royal blackmail. But he also knew that possessing this information made him incredibly dangerous to powerful people, who had already demonstrated their willingness to monitor and threaten those who posed a risk to their plans. As Mitchell returned to his patrol route, his mind raced with the implications of what he had discovered. The ultimatum was scheduled to be delivered to Harry within 48 hours. Princess Anne's team had already put surveillance and pressure campaigns into motion. And somewhere in America, Harry and Meghan were going about their daily lives completely unaware that the full weight of the royal establishment was about to come crashing down on them. The question that haunted Mitchell now was whether he had the courage to act on what he knew, and whether he could find a way to warn Harry before it was too late. Because one thing was certain, the next few days would determine not just Harry's future, but the very nature of what it meant to be born into the British royal family in the modern world. Time was running out, and the weight of secrets had become a burden that threatened to crush not just Mitchell, but everyone caught in the crossfire of a family conflict that had escalated far beyond anything the public could imagine. The private jet touched down at a small airfield outside London just after midnight on Sunday, its arrival carefully timed to avoid media attention. Harry stepped onto the tarmac with a sense of foreboding that had been building ever since he received Princess Anne's cryptic message requesting an urgent family meeting. The message had been brief but compelling. Family matters requiring immediate attention. Your presence essential. Cannot discuss over phone or video call. For the first time in over 2 years, Harry found himself back on British soil without Meghan or the children. The decision to come alone had been difficult, but Anne's message had been clear that this was a matter requiring absolute privacy. Meghan had been reluctant to let him go without her, sensing that something significant was about to unfold, but Harry had convinced her that it was probably just another attempt at reconciliation that would ultimately lead nowhere. How wrong he was about to discover himself to be. The drive through the countryside toward the meeting location took Harry through familiar landscapes that stirred complicated emotions. These rolling hills and ancient villages had been the backdrop of his childhood, filled with memories both cherished and painful. But tonight, the familiar scenery felt ominous, as though the very land was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Princess Anne had chosen Gatcombe Park, her private residence in Gloucestershire, as the venue for their meeting. The choice was strategic, far from the media attention that surrounded the official royal residences, but still unmistakably royal territory. As Harry's car pulled up the gravel drive, he saw Anne waiting for him on the front steps, her posture rigid and formal despite the late hour. "Hello, Harry," she said as he approached, her greeting devoid of the warmth that had characterized their relationship during his childhood. There was no embrace, no smile, just a curt nod that immediately put him on guard. "Aunt Anne," Harry replied, searching her face for some hint of what lay ahead.
"Thank you for agreeing to meet. I have to admit your message was rather mysterious."
"Mysterious circumstances require mysterious communications," Anne replied curtly.
"Come inside. We have a great deal to discuss and very little time to do it." The interior of Gatcombe Park was exactly as Harry remembered from his childhood visits. Traditional, comfortable, and thoroughly English. But tonight, the familiar surroundings felt oppressive rather than welcoming. Anne led him to her private study, a room lined with books and photographs that chronicled decades of royal service and equestrian achievements. Sir Edward Thornbury was waiting for them, seated at a small table with several folders arranged in front of him. His presence immediately elevated the formality of the occasion, making it clear that this was not going to be a family chat but something far more serious. "Please, sit down," Anne instructed, gesturing to a chair across from Sir Edward. The arrangement felt uncomfortably like an interrogation, with Harry facing the two of them across the table. "Before we begin," Anne continued, "I need your assurance that everything discussed in this room tonight will remain absolutely confidential. Regardless of what decisions are made going forward, the contents of this conversation must never be disclosed to anyone, including Meghan." Harry felt his unease deepening. "That's a rather unusual request, Anne. Meghan and I don't keep secrets from each other." "Perhaps that's part of the problem," Anne replied coldly. "Your inability to maintain appropriate boundaries between your personal relationships and your royal obligations has created the situation we now need to address."
The comment stung, but Harry tried to maintain his composure. "What situation?"
"Anne, I flew halfway around the world because you said there was some urgent family matter. Can we please get to the point?" Sir Edward cleared his throat and opened the first folder. Your Royal Highness, we need to discuss the long-term implications of your current path and the impact it's having on the monarchy as an institution. I left the working royal family over 3 years ago, Harry replied, his frustration beginning to show. I've been very clear that I want to build my own life, away from all of this. What more do you want from me? What we want, Anne said, leaning forward with intensity that Harry had rarely seen from her, is for you to understand that leaving the royal family doesn't mean leaving behind royal consequences. Your actions, your public statements, your business ventures, they all continue to affect the institution you were born into. Sir Edward slid a photograph across the table. Do you recognize this document, Your Royal Highness? Harry looked at the image and felt his heart skip a beat. It was a photograph of a handwritten note he had written during one of the most difficult periods of his royal service, documenting his concerns about certain family decisions and their potential consequences. The note had been private, meant only for his personal records, and seeing it here felt like a profound violation. Where did you get this? Harry demanded, his voice rising. That's not the relevant question, Anne replied smoothly. The relevant question is what other documentation exists from your time as a working royal, and what obligations you have regarding the confidentiality of that information. Sir Edward opened another folder, revealing what appeared to be copies of emails, personal correspondence, and meeting notes, all in Harry's handwriting or bearing his digital signature. The scope of the material was staggering, representing years of private communications and personal observations. This is outrageous, Harry said, standing up abruptly. These are private documents, personal notes. You have no right. We have every right, Anne interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. These documents were created during your time as a working member of the royal family, using royal resources in the course of official duties. They belong to the crown, not to you personally. Harry stared at his aunt in disbelief. The woman who had been a source of stability and strength throughout his childhood, who had supported him through his military service and early royal duties, was now sitting across from him, making what amounted to legal threats. What do you want? Harry asked quietly, sinking back into his chair. We want you to come home, Anne replied, but there was no warmth in the offer. Not for visits, not for special occasions, but permanently. You, Meghan, and the children. That's impossible. Our life is in California now. We have businesses, commitments, a home. All of which can be transferred or terminated, Sir Edward interjected smoothly. We've prepared a comprehensive plan for your return to royal duties, including appropriate accommodations and a gradual reintegration into official responsibilities. Anne slid another document across the table. These are the terms we're proposing. Full return to working royal status within 6 months. Cessation of all independent media activities and business ventures. Submission to Palace Communications oversight for all public statements going forward. And most importantly, your formal agreement never to disclose or publish any information related to your previous experiences as a working royal. Harry scanned the document, his disbelief growing with each paragraph. The terms weren't a negotiation, they were a complete capitulation. Everything he and Meghan had built, everything they had worked toward, would have to be abandoned. And if I refuse? Harry asked, though he dreaded the answer. Anne's expression hardened further. Then you'll discover that the royal family has resources and reach that extend far beyond what you might expect. Your business ventures in America have been successful largely because of the goodwill associated with your royal connection. That goodwill can be withdrawn. Sir Edward opened a final folder, revealing what appeared to be financial documents and legal analyses. Your current business partnerships rely heavily on your royal status and the media attention it generates. Should that status be formally revoked? Should certain unflattering information about your departure from royal duties become public, those partnerships would likely prove unsustainable. You're talking about blackmail, Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper.
We're talking about consequences, Anne replied firmly.
Every choice has consequences, Harry. You chose to leave. You chose to speak publicly about private family matters. You chose to commercialize your royal experiences. Now you need to choose how this story ends. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Harry stared at the documents spread across the table, trying to process the magnitude of what was being demanded of him. This wasn't just about returning to royal duties. It was about completely surrendering the independence and autonomy that he and Meghan had fought so hard to achieve. How long do I have to decide? Harry asked finally. 72 hours. Anne replied without hesitation. After that, certain wheels will be set in motion that cannot be stopped. And Meghan, the children? You're asking me to uproot their entire lives based on threats and coercion. We're asking you to fulfill the obligations you were born to fulfill, Anne said, her voice softening slightly for the first time during the meeting. Harry, you're my nephew, and I care about you. But I care more about the institution that our family has served for over 1,000 years. Sometimes individual desires must be sacrificed for the greater good. As the meeting concluded and Harry prepared to leave, he found himself looking at Princess Anne with new eyes. The aunt he had admired for her strength and dedication had revealed herself to be capable of a ruthlessness that he had never imagined. The royal family he had grown up within wasn't just a family. It was an institution with the power and willingness to destroy anyone who threatened its stability, even its own members. The drive back to the airfield was a blur of emotion and racing thoughts. Harry knew that he now faced the most consequential decision of his life: accept Anne's ultimatum and surrender everything he and Meghan had built together, or refuse and face the systematic destruction of their new life through methods that were both sophisticated and merciless. As his plane lifted off from British soil, Harry realized that his childhood understanding of the royal family had been naive. He had thought that leaving meant freedom, that building a new life in America meant escape from royal obligations, that sitting in the darkness of the private jet, staring down at the lights of London disappearing below, he understood that some bonds could never be truly broken, and some institutions would pursue their perceived enemies to the ends of the earth. The ultimatum had been delivered, and now Harry had less than 3 days to make a choice that would determine not just his future, but the future of his wife and children. The weight of that decision, and the knowledge of what his family was truly capable of, settled over him like a heavy blanket as he flew through the night toward a confrontation with Meghan that would change everything. Princess Anne's plan was now in motion, and there would be no going back for any of them. The California morning sun streamed through the windows of Harry and Meghan's Montecito home. As Harry sat at the kitchen table, the ultimatum documents spread before him like evidence of some unthinkable crime. He had been home for 18 hours, but sleep had been impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Princess Anne's cold expression and heard Sir Edward's veiled threats echoing in his mind. Meghan had sensed immediately that something was terribly wrong. Harry's usual warmth had been replaced by a distant, haunted expression that frightened her more than any argument or disagreement ever could. When she had pressed him for details about the family meeting, Harry had initially tried to deflect, telling her only that there were complicated family matters to work through. But as the hours passed and Harry's distress became increasingly apparent, Meghan had demanded the truth. The conversation that followed had been one of the most difficult of their marriage. "They want us to give up everything," Harry had finally told her, his voice breaking as he described the meeting at Gatcombe Park. "Not just the business ventures, not just our independence. Everything we've built together. They want us to come back permanently, to submit to their control completely." Meghan had listened in stunned silence as Harry detailed the scope of Princess Anne's ultimatum, the mysterious documents they claimed to possess, and the threats that had been made so politely but so unmistakably. When he finished speaking, they had sat together in the darkness of their bedroom, holding each other and trying to process the magnitude of what they were facing. Now, as the morning light illuminated the peaceful garden where their children often played, Harry found himself confronting the most impossible choice of his life. On one side was the life they had carefully constructed, imperfect perhaps, but free and honest and entirely their own. On the other was a return to a gilded cage that would ensure their security but destroy their souls. "We can't go back," Meghan said quietly as she joined him at the table, having finally gotten the children settled with their morning activities. "Harry, you know we can't." "Not under these conditions, not as prisoners." Harry looked at his wife, seeing the determination in her eyes that had first attracted him to her, but also seeing the fear that she was trying so hard to hide. "But if we don't, they'll destroy everything we've worked for. Our foundation, the media projects, all of it. And they have information, Meghan. Documents from my time as a working royal that could be damaging."
What kind of information? Meghan asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know.
Harry hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed her some of the photographs he had taken of the documents spread across Sir Edward's table.
As Meghan scrolled through the images, her expression grew increasingly troubled. "These are your private notes," she said, her voice rising with indignation. "Your personal observations and concerns. Harry, some of these are about conversations you had with William, with your father, deeply personal family discussions." "I know," But they were written during my time as a working royal, using palace resources. Legally, they're claiming ownership. Meghan set the phone down and looked directly into Harry's eyes. And you believe them? You believe they would actually use these against us? Before Harry could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice on the other end was one that would change everything. Your Royal Highness, said a nervous male voice. My name is James Mitchell. I'm a security officer at Windsor Castle. I need to speak with you urgently about Princess Anne's ultimatum and some information that you need to know. Harry's heart nearly stopped. How did you get this number? Who are you? Sir, I've been serving the royal family for 15 years. 3 days ago, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Princess Anne and Sir Edward Thornbury about their plans for you. What they told you is just the beginning. There's much more you need to know. Meghan watched Harry's face change as he listened to the caller, seeing a mixture of hope and terror in his expression. When Harry put the call on speaker, both of them listened in growing amazement as Sergeant Mitchell detailed everything he had learned about Protocol 7, the surveillance operation that had been monitoring their life in California, and the true scope of the royal family's campaign against them.
They've been watching us for months? Meghan asked, her voice barely controlled.
According to the documents I saw, yes, ma'am. Financial monitoring, communication intercepts, even surveillance of your business meetings. The operation is extensive. Harry felt a surge of anger that was quickly overwhelmed by a sense of violation and betrayal. Why are you telling us this? Why risk your career? Mitchell was quiet for a moment before responding. Because what I heard and what I saw in those documents. It's not right, sir. I took an oath to serve the Crown, but I also took an oath as a British citizen to uphold justice and decency. What they're planning to do to you and your family goes beyond family discipline or institutional protection. It's systematic persecution. Over the next hour, Mitchell provided Harry and Meghan with detailed information about the timeline of Princess Anne's plan, the specific threats that had been prepared, and most importantly, copies of the key documents he had photographed. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying, showing a level of royal family resources and ruthlessness that neither Harry nor Meghan had imagined possible. But Mitchell had more than just information to offer. Sir, there are others within the royal household who are uncomfortable with what's happening. People who believe that family disagreements shouldn't be handled through coercion and threats. If you decide to fight this, you won't be completely alone. As the call ended, Harry and Meghan found themselves staring at each other across the kitchen table, the morning sun now feeling harsh rather than welcoming. Everything had changed in the span of a single phone call. They now had evidence of the royal family's campaign against them, but they also had confirmation that the threat was far more serious than they had realized. We need to call our lawyers, Meghan said, her voice steady despite the chaos of emotions she was clearly experiencing.
If they're surveilling us, if they're planning to sabotage our business relationships, we need legal protection.
But even as she spoke, both of them understood that legal protection might not be enough against an institution with centuries of experience in protecting itself and eliminating threats. The royal family had resources that extended far beyond normal legal or financial power. They had influence, connections, and most importantly, the ability to shape public opinion through carefully controlled media relationships. Over the next 24 hours, Harry and Meghan worked frantically to understand their options and protect their interests. They consulted with lawyers, financial advisors, and public relations experts, trying to build a defense against an attack that was unlike anything any of them had encountered before. But as they researched their legal position and explored their alternatives, a troubling picture emerged. Many of their business relationships were indeed vulnerable to the kind of pressure that Princess Anne had threatened. Their financial independence, which had felt so secure, was actually built on a foundation that could be systematically undermined by a coordinated campaign of reputational damage and business interference. The deadline was approaching. Less than 24 hours remained before Princess Anne's 72-hour ultimatum expired. Harry found himself pacing the garden where he had played with his children just days earlier, trying to reconcile the peaceful normalcy of his current life with the knowledge that it was all about to change irrevocably. It was Meghan who finally forced the conversation they both knew they had to have. Harry, we need to decide, she said as they sat together that evening after putting the children to bed. We can't keep living in this limbo, and we can't make decisions based on fear. I know, Harry replied, taking her hands in his. But either choice feels like we're losing something essential. If we go back, we lose our freedom, our independence, everything we fought for. If we stay and fight, we risk losing our security, our children's future stability, maybe even our safety." Megan was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the California landscape they had both grown to love. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm with a resolve that Harry recognized from their earliest conversations about leaving royal life. "Then we fight," she said simply. "We fight with everything we have, and we trust that the truth will protect us. Because if we give in to this now, Harry, it will never end. They'll own us forever, and our children will grow up knowing that their parents chose security over principle when it mattered most." Harry felt something shift inside him as he listened to his wife's words. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued him since the meeting with Princess Anne began to transform into something else: anger, determination, and a clear understanding of what kind of man and father he wanted to be. "You're right," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We didn't leave royal life just to become royal prisoners in America. If they want to fight, they'll get one." The next morning, exactly 71 hours after Princess Anne's ultimatum had been delivered, Harry placed a call to Gatcombe Park. When Sir Edward answered, Harry's voice was calm but absolutely firm. "Sir Edward, please inform Princess Anne that I have made my decision regarding her proposal. I will not be accepting the terms she outlined. My family and I will remain in California, and we will continue to build our independent lives. If the royal family chooses to pursue the threats that were made, we will respond accordingly through legal channels." The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds before Sir Edward responded. "Your Royal Highness, I hope you understand the implications of this decision." "I understand them perfectly," Harry replied, "and I hope Princess Anne understands that I am no longer the person who can be controlled through threats and manipulation. If she wants to use private family documents against me, she'll discover that I have my own documentation of royal family activities that might be of interest to the public." It was a bluff, but Harry delivered it with such conviction that even Meghan believed it for a moment. The call ended with polite formalities that masked the declaration of war that had just been made. Within hours, the consequences began to unfold, but to Harry and Meghan's surprise, they weren't alone in the fight. Sergeant Mitchell's revelation that there were others in the royal household who disapproved of Princess Anne's tactics proved to be accurate. A small but significant number of royal staff members, both current and former, began to provide information and support that helped Harry and Meghan understand and counter the campaign being waged against them. More importantly, the evidence that Mitchell had provided allowed their legal team to take proactive steps to protect their business interests and challenge some of the surveillance activities that had been conducted against them. The royal family's assumption that Harry and Meghan would fight alone and without resources proved to be a significant miscalculation. As the days passed, it became clear that Princess Anne's ultimatum had set in motion a conflict that would reshape the modern royal family in ways that no one could have predicted. Harry's decision to fight rather than surrender had not only preserved his family's independence but had also exposed fault lines within the royal household that threatened the very unity that Princess Anne had been trying to protect. The guard who had accidentally overheard a private conversation had become the catalyst for a transformation that would echo through generations of the British monarchy. Sometimes, the most significant historical moments begin with the smallest, most accidental discoveries. And sometimes, the courage to fight for what's right comes from the most unexpected sources. Princess Anne's ultimatum had been designed to bring Harry home and restore royal control. Instead, it had created a new kind of royal family, one where independence and authenticity mattered more than tradition and obedience. The future would bring new challenges and new conflicts, but Harry, Meghan, and their children would face them as free people, unbowed by threats and unbroken by intimidation. The choice had been made, and everything had changed forever.